Welcome to the Silverstone Grand Prix circuit for the title decider in the Protyre Motorsport Ginetta GT5 Championship. We had a really intense race yesterday that has teed us up absolutely perfectly for this one. It essentially boils down to a winner-takes-all fight between Josh Malin and James Taylor. And guess what? They will share the front row of the grid together. Just a single point separate them after yesterday's race. And that means that we're in for an absolute nail-biter, I think, here this afternoon. So it is Malin then that will be on pole, but not having won the race yesterday. It was James Taylor that came home victorious after slightly a dramatic start to the race for Josh, really. Josh Malin arrived here with the championship lead, but wasn't really able to hang on to it for long. Into the first corner, he ran wheel-to-wheel with James Taylor. Out of the first corner, they ran wheel-to-wheel, and then when they got down to Beckett, it was Taylor that held on to the advantage. Malin got shuffled out wide and fell down the order somewhat. Well, we'll get to that in a moment, though, because this is how the grid lines up. It's Malin on pole, as I said, with his title rival James Taylor alongside him. Row number 2 for John Bennett, who was a star yesterday, and Gordy Much, who arrived here at Silverstone mathematically in contention, but no longer is. Tom Golding makes his debut in the championship, straight on the pace, 5th place on the grid for this one with Magnus Krickleby, who was in amongst all of the action, it seemed, yesterday. Nate Hodgkiss was a spinner on lap 1, with Blake Anglis alongside him on row number 4. Then it's Rory McKean and Ashley Marshall to round out the top 10. The back end of the top 10 yesterday was particularly finely poised. I expect the same again in this one. Dan Bird and Ollie Allwood are making his series debut as well. Many people using this final round as a chance to dip their toe in the Ginetta waters. Conor Garlick is next ahead of Richard Tetlow, who's the AM class pole sitter. AM category yesterday, though, was won by Phil McGarty, who shares the second row of the AM grid, if you like, the 8th row of the overall grid with Karim Sekat. Then next in line behind them, Bal Sidhu and Ian Duggan getting towards the back now of this grid. In fact, that is the back of the grid, 18 cars. And the AM drivers, as you'd expect, with slightly less experience at the back of the field. So, after yesterday's race, as I said, all to play for, really. The win went to James Taylor. Josh Malin fell, I think, as far down as 8th or 9th, potentially, in the early stages, but was able to fight his way back through, eventually coming home a solid 3rd position. He also had pole position for that race yesterday, so he was able to get a bonus point for that, and neither of the championship contenders got the bonus point for fastest lap in the end. It was the second place finisher, John Bennett, who set the fastest lap of the race, which yesterday was a 2:24.394. But conditions today, as you can see, are slightly less favourable. It's still very foggy, as it has been all morning here at Silverstone. A little damp on the track as well, and that will make for some slightly sketchy conditions perhaps, especially if you have to go offline to overtake or just to try and stay out of trouble on this opening lap. So with 1 point separating Malin and Taylor, it's Taylor, incidentally, that is ahead on points for what it matters, which is very little, actually, because generally speaking, I mean, the difference between finishing 1st and 2nd in this race, you get 35 points for a win, 30 for 2nd, 26 for 3rd, then 22 for 4th, and down then in 2-point increments. You have to be all the way down in 9th and 10th positions before the difference is only 1 point. So as long as they are in, Josh Malin and James Taylor this is, as long as they are in the top 8, then it is winner takes all. If they're out of the top 8, both of them out of the top 8 that is, then it starts to get a bit more complicated, because that bonus point for fastest lap could suddenly start to come into play. But with a bit of luck, mainly because my mental arithmetic is not good enough to cope with that eventuality. With a bit of luck, they won't end up that far down the order. Unless they have dramas, they shouldn't do, because they've at least got top 5 pace, I think, regardless, even if they really start battling with each other, which is certainly more of a possibility, I think. Neither of them are going to want to let the other have this. It's been a titanic season-long battle between the two of them. Josh Malin won the opening round back at Alton Park. James Taylor also was a race winner that weekend, but the two had contact in an earlier race, and Taylor lost a few positions as a result, finished all the way down in 10th place. Josh Malin did go on, I think, to win that race on the road, but was subsequently given a penalty, and really he spent the rest of the year trying to fight back from that. He has gone on to win a further 6 races, though, Josh Malin. 2 at Alton Park, 1 at Knock Hill, 1 at Donington Park, and 2 here at Silverstone, actually, in a different race meeting a few weeks ago. So Josh Malin is the one with most wins. If it therefore ends on a tie, Malin would win on countback. So again, that won't happen unless they're outside of the top 8 or 9 or so, but that is a possibility. And if they end up tied on points, it's Malin's championship to win. Here we go then. The race distance will be 20 minutes, 5 minutes shorter than yesterday's race, 5 minutes shorter than planned, simply because we've had a few delays earlier on in the morning, but it's ample time, I think, for the Ginetta GT5 Challenge to give us plenty of excitement. The front row is where your championship contenders are. It's Malin on the outside, Taylor on the inside, the lights are out, and Josh Malin's had a good getaway from the outside of row number 1, and he will try to seize the advantage into Copse Corner, but James Taylor is having absolutely none of it. The two title contenders run wheel to wheel for the second race in a row through the first corner. It's an action replay of yesterday, except this time it's Gordy Much who is going after them in third place and could be set to benefit if the two make contact. Much goes with Josh Malin, gives him a shove down to Maggins and Beckett, and Malin has the lead. He chops across the nose of James Taylor, and that was not what he was able to do yesterday. In yesterday's race, Malin tried to duke it out around the outside. Oh, and he ended up getting elbowed out wide. He nearly ended up wide again there because Taylor got into the back of him as they go through Chapel and out onto the Hanger Straight. We peer through the gloom to see the slipstream starting to take effect. The whole pack is going to bunch together now as they make their way towards Stowe, one of the best overtaking opportunities. Josh Malin has the lead, James Taylor second, Gordy Much third, John Bennett in fourth place. They fan out under braking. Taylor sends it round the outside. If he can stop the car, this might just work. Malin's running wide as well, and Gordy Much makes it 3 wide for the race lead down the hill towards Club. This surely can't end well. Two title contenders, and Gordy Much with nothing to lose in this final race of the year is going to go around the outside and get them both. Gordy Much gets the lead, Josh Malin second, and Tom Golding joins in the fun as well. Nearly clatters into the side of James Taylor. He backed out of it sensibly. That means Magnus Kruklevi gets up the inside and ahead of him. But that was some sensational racing. Gordy Much, who can no longer win the championship, but he can certainly go out with a bang with a race win here. He has got the lead with Malin second and James Taylor in third place. Further back, good battling going on there with Nate Hodgkiss, the orange car, who never made it this far on the first lap of yesterday's race. Now Josh Malin coming up to attack Gordy Much. How is this one going to work out? If Much starts defending, it will back Malin up into James Taylor. That is not what Josh Malin needs. Taylor takes the wide line through the loop, tries to carry more momentum off the corner to get the slipstream down the Wellington Straight, but in the end they come off the corner pretty equally. Side by side further back, that looks like Daniel Budd having one of his better races this year. He's had absolutely no luck as Daniel all season long, but he's racing away there with, I think that's Nate Hodgkiss coming down into Brooklands Corner, as the leaders once again start this compression that they do at the end of any long straight. The slipstream bunches them together, and that means they arrive at the next braking point, all on top of each other. Tom Golding running wide as he tries to get back ahead of Magnus Kruklevi. Magnus on the inside line you'd think would prevail, but the momentum from the outside line from Tom Golding, who is this year's G40 Cup champion and dominant G40 Cup champion as well, making his first weekend's appearance in the GT5 Challenge, going really well. He was up there in a podium place in the early stages of yesterday's race, dicing away here for 5th position with Kruklevi, but Kruklevi has the inside at Copse. No, still can't get the job done, so Golding is still hanging on around the outside as the leaders duke and dive down into Maggins and Beckett, and Malin is going for it on Gordy Much. He goes through and gets the lead, and now there is a car between Malin and Taylor. James Taylor suddenly is the one who really has the pressure applied. He has to find a way past Gordy Much. John Bennett is sideways and pointing the wrong way behind. I think he locked up and tried to avoid hitting James Taylor, and as a result lost the rear of the car. That's a real shame for John Bennett, who had, as I said, a really impressive showing in yesterday's race, and sadly he's not likely to have a repeat of his podium. It was his second podium in a row that he got. He had one last time at Silverstone, one yesterday, and was looking good maybe for another one today until that spin. That does mean the top 3 now have the track to themselves, but still James Taylor cannot find a way past Gordy Much. He's going to go to the outside here into the left-hander before Club, and that gives him the inside line for Club Corner. And Gordy Much, I don't think there's much he can do about that, because James Taylor had the preferred line and managed to cleanly move his way into second place. That little side-by-side exchange, though, has gifted Josh Malin 4 or 5 car lengths at least over James Taylor and Gordy Much behind him. Whilst in the background, look, it is now Tom Golding ahead of Kruklevi. So Golding is 4th, Kruklevi 5th, and Blake Anglis, I think that is, having a really good run in 6th place. In the AM category, Richard Tetlow leads the way, car number 24, you can see him there, racing with Ollie Allwood, who is a pro driver, not an AM. But then the next car behind them, the green and black car, is Karim Sekat. So 24 and 10, Tetlow and Sekat are the top 2 in the AM category, separated by Ollie Allwood, another series debutant in the AV Motorsport car. AV Motorsport Ali Bray's team. Ali runs cars in Master MX-5 racing very successfully, and indeed Ollie Allwood is the 2020 Mark 1 Master MX-5 champion here in the UK. And as a bit of a prize maybe to himself, he and the team have branched out into GT5 Challenge. Similar concept really, one makes sports car racing but slightly quicker machinery, obviously higher profile championship, and Allwood perhaps looking towards a 2021 campaign. He's still dicing away here with Richard TETLOW, who runs a bit wide, gives Allwood the inside line coming off Luffield, and TETLOW doesn't really need to be fighting him because he's not in the same class as Allwood. I was about to ask though, no, that is not Karim Sekan, it's the other green and black car, which is Ashley Marshall, who has had a spin, and that's at Brooklands, and he's a long way off the road as well, so I suspect maybe he got there with some assistance. 29 car going no further. Right, fastest lap Josh Malin, bonus point therefore for Josh Malin. But more importantly, perhaps he had a 6/10 of a second cushion over James Taylor at the start of the lap, but 2 or 3 corners later, Taylor is right back with him, so a mega run through Copse and Maggots and Beckett has put Taylor right back on the tail of his championship rival, and Gordy Much in 3rd place, very much going with them as well. There is Crickleby still dicing with Blake Anglis, but it's all about this fight at the front. Can James Taylor get himself ahead of Josh Malin? Well, he's going to give it a go. He goes to the outside again at Stowe. This is the move he tried on lap 1, and it really didn't work because Gordy Much was actually the beneficiary behind them. Will that be the same story now? Malin on the inside, Taylor goes right around the outside. That buys him a ticket then to the inside line into the next braking zone, and this should now put James Taylor back ahead. Yes, it does, but Malin fights back up the inside. There's so nearly contact between the two of them. Wouldn't be the first time this year these two are traded paint, but Malin now finds himself hung out to dry, and Gordy Much sticks his nose in the gap on the inside. Malin needs to try and cover that one off, which he does. Gets a good run off Club Corner as well, so he slots back in line in second, but that change of race lead also is a change of championship lead. James Taylor is now in a position to win the title. Josh Malin needs to beat him in this race if he wants to wrestle it away from him. We are only a third of the way through though, plenty of time for this to change, and it doesn't look as though any one of these 3 drivers has the pace to escape from the other 2, so the only way someone's going to pull clear, I think, at the front here is if 2nd and 3rd place start squabbling, and it's in Josh Malin's best interests not to let that happen. He will not want to be driving defensively here to keep Gordy Much at bay, because he knows that could cost him realistically a chance at coming back at James Taylor. Down the Wellington Straight into Brooklands, they are about to go once more. Can Taylor have a lunge up the inside? No, goes to the outside. Sorry, Malin, excuse me, goes to the outside because Taylor was a little early on the brakes. They were side by side in the background as well, weren't they? That is the Golding Crickleby Anglis squabble. What order have they got themselves into? Still Crickleby ahead, or now Crickleby ahead, I should say, of Golding. So Crickleby back into 4th position, Golding down to 5th, and they've been reeled in again by Nate Hodgkiss now in the orange and black 59. Leading 3 back across the line. Fastest lap still with Malin, but as we've made the point a few times, that really doesn't matter as far as the title is concerned. Golding under pressure from Blake Anglis here, and that could be 5th place for Blake. No, not quite. Tom Golding goes right around the outside of Copse. It's all about momentum in these cars. They don't have a huge amount of power. They're not very aerodynamic, and so it's all about carrying that extra mile an hour or so off the corners, especially at this circuit where most of the corners lead onto long straights. You've really got to come off the turn. Coming off the turn well is more important than going into it well, in a way, because that then gives you that momentum all the way down the next straight. The slipstream helps as well, and that's what Josh Malin will now try to use in order to retaliate against James Taylor, who has the race lead. He has the championship lead as a result, but he also has Josh Malin to his outside now as they go into Stowe Corner. Now Malin, I don't think, is quite as keen on trying that outside move that James Taylor used to great success a lap ago, so he slots back in line. He's maybe a bit more concerned about Gordy Much behind him getting in on the act, but he's way quicker down the hill than James Taylor, who just needs to sit on the inside. Now, that will have sent a clear message to Taylor, actually. The fact that Malin is not willing to take such a risk by going around the outside of him, maybe that means that Taylor, as long as he holds the inside line into all of these overtaking opportunities, he should be okay. If it was the last lap, I'm sure that the story might be different. Malin, at that point, would have to throw caution to the wind, but right now, holding on to 2nd place for Malin is more important than having an all-out kamikaze move around the outside of James Taylor for the lead. However, as I say that, he goes to the outside into Village, but he wasn't quite close enough again. Look, ducks over to the inside to cover from Gordy Much and heads into the left-hander at the loop. 3 very different lines on the way in. Malin trying to go over the curb to get the cutback on the inside, which he might just have done. No, still no way through, and now they're both compromised. Look into the next left-hander as they go out onto the Wellington Straight. Gordy Much has a run on the 2 of them. Gordy Much is the proverbial cat being thrown among the pigeons here, isn't he? Because he is no longer, as I said, in championship contention. So the other two would much rather he wasn't there, because he has nothing to lose, and he very much doesn't mind going around the outside of Josh Malin. That gives him the inside for Luffield corner, and Gordy Much might be about to move back into second place. He does. Watch for Josh Malin on the exit, though. He's taken a wide line in to try and carry the speed through Luffield and into Woodcote corner. So Taylor leads the way, Much second, Josh Malin down to third. I think we've had every imaginable combination now between these three. I think they've all had a stint in the lead, they've all had a stint in second, and they've now all had a stint in third place as well. But as we saw from Josh Malin yesterday, he is more than capable of gritting his teeth and getting on with this. When he's got to overtake people, he can, but he's got to overtake the two fiercest rivals that he's had all year, really. These top three drivers in the championship. They're going to be hard to overtake, but James Taylor makes a mistake. James Taylor from the race lead runs wide at Beckett. Gordy Much gets the lead, but Josh Malin critically was not able to go through with him because he was just a car length or so too far back. That was a strange moment, that, for James Taylor. I don't know whether he got on the curb going through Maggots, but the car just wasn't for turning into the right-hander at Beckett's, and that allows Gordy Much through into first position. Now, Gordy could potentially escape here, because now Taylor and Malin are going to be well and truly preoccupied with each other. They're not really going to want to, they're not going to be too bothered about Gordy Much. A race win is not what they need, they just need to beat each other. By the way, fastest lap has just been set by the car running down in 11th place, and that is the 27 car, which is the recovering John Bennett, of course, after his spin on the, well, not the opening lap, in the early stages down at Beckett's. He has recovered up into 11th place. This is the moment. Well, he wasn't on the curb, he just didn't have the grip when he got to the corner. It looked as though it was getting a bit sideways, and maybe just to make sure it didn't spin completely, he opened up the steering, let off the throttle, and gathered it together without running off the road. He's coming back at Gordy Much again now. Doesn't really need to do this, but and here comes Malin around the outside. Josh Malin, well, out of nowhere, has got himself back ahead of James Taylor. He's got the inside for the next corner. There's a bit more contact between the two of them. All this is getting tense now. There's a bit of needle between these two, and there has been all year after that contact at Alton at the start of the season. And it's just typical, isn't it? The motor racing gods have a weird sense of humour sometimes, and it's pretty typical that those two drivers would be the two that are now in a winner-takes-all championship fight at the last race. Malin then into second place, back into the points lead, but now he's the one that's kind of in the worst position in a way. Yes, he's ahead of James Taylor. Yes, he's scoring enough points to wrap up the title, but he's also stuck behind Gordy Much, who is not getting away, and therefore he's risking getting backed up into James Taylor again. It's going to be a really fascinating final few laps, this. Just under 8 minutes still to go as we come through to complete 5 laps of racing. And when we get onto that final lap, it's going to be a real chess match to know where in the queue you want to be. Do you want to be leading? Well, maybe not, because then you're a sitting duck down the straight. Do you want to be at the back? Well, maybe not, because it's going to be hard to overtake potentially 2 cars in 1 lap. But then you don't really want to be in the middle either, because then you're stuck attacking and defending. So wherever they are in this group, they're going to have their hands full going into the final few laps, I reckon. Much then has the edge as they go through Beckett's once again. 7.25 minutes left on the clock. As things stand, Josh Malin would be your GT5 Challenge champion. But it will more than likely change hands another couple of times, I think, before the end of this race. Yesterday's race was an entertaining one, but because Malin sort of got elbowed out wide in the early stages, and James Taylor was able to build a bit of a cushion, it kind of spread out a bit towards the end of the race. No chance of that today, though, as Josh Malin goes round the outside of Gordy Much and gets the lead away. That looked rather easy, actually, for a round the outside pass at Stowe. Gordy Much maybe wasn't expecting Malin to take that sort of a risk, but Malin's got the lead. He's got that car between himself and Taylor, but Much is coming back at him around the outside, and this could be Taylor's chance to get up the inside of Malin too. Much will go back into the race lead. Malin's out over the curbs. He manages just about to get himself back in line, and once again we're back where we were, with Much leading and Malin almost into the back of him as they go past the Silverstone wing. That puts him on the outside line into Abbey Corner, and James Taylor might try and go up the inside. He does try and go up the inside. James Taylor back ahead of Josh Malin. Sensational racing this is, with a championship on the line as well. It doesn't get much more exciting than this. James Taylor now moves himself back into the championship winning position that he needs. I said it would change hands a few times before the end of the race. Well, it changed hands a couple of times there in the space of the next 2 or 3 corners. And all of this really is being caused by Gordy Much being a part of this fight, and he has every right to be a part of this fight. Ah, that's a shame. Tom Golding in the gravel. I think that's down at Club. And yes, it is on the no, it's Where is that? That might actually be down at the loop. I'm not quite sure. It's somewhere at that part of the circuit through around the Silverstone wing area. Yeah, it is through club, so he's backed it up into the gravel. Whether with assistance or not, I'm not too sure. But the main significance for that is that that car could be deemed to be in a dangerous position. Now, a safety car wouldn't exactly bunch this group up anymore, but what it would do is rob Josh Malin of a chance to get back ahead of James Taylor. A safety car now is not really what Malin needs. They'd love a safety car if he was ahead of Taylor, but that's not the situation. Into Copse corner they go, and Taylor sidesteps Gordy Much, goes up the inside and gets first position back away, but they will both be very slow off the corner. Watch Josh Malin. He might make it 3 wide down to Beckett. He does make it 3 wide towards Beckett. Much on the outside, Malin on the inside. He goes into second, he goes into first. Josh Malin gets himself back into the lead of the race. James Taylor has to go with him. There's contact with Gordy Much, who slams the door in his face, and Josh Malin once again has the advantage. He's got first position. James Taylor down to third. Another prime example of how James Taylor racing Gordy Much was not what he needed to be doing. If he'd have just followed Much through Copse corner, they'd have come off the corner at the same speed, and Malin wouldn't have had that opportunity. It is not over yet though, because Much now has the slipstream. He's looking to the inside into Stowe corner, but he's too far back that time. In the end, they stay as they were, and well, Josh Malin, I bet he couldn't believe his eyes when he saw that going on there. What a run he got, and what a run into Beckett's it was as well. Right, live snatch is ongoing down at this part of the circuit, so no overtaking, obviously. Double wave yellows will be out into club, but once they come out of the corner, they can resume this incredibly intense battle. They're about 4.5 seconds clear of Magnus Kruklevi, incidentally, who is fourth, and Nate Hodgkiss in fifth, making up, more than making up for his issues yesterday. It looked yesterday as though he'd had contact with Josh Malin when he spun on the opening lap down at Stowe, but apparently Hodgkiss was losing it anyway, and Malin actually did a really good job to avoid him. James Taylor sideways there as he goes into the braking zone at Village. And that shows just how hard they're pushing, doesn't it? James Taylor in particular, he knows now he's only got 3.5 minutes, so there will be another 2 laps after this one, won't there then? Because they're going to get back to the line with just under 3 minutes to go, and lap times are just under 2.5 minutes. So there will be 2 laps left in the race, 2 laps left in the season after this. Tom Golding's car is out of the way as well down at club. That's good news. So overtaking once again permissible at that part of the track. And this is it then, this whole season. What a bizarre season it's been for many reasons. It all boils down to this then, a 2-lap shootout. Well, it's been a 20-minute shootout really, hasn't it? But we're now getting down to the business end of the race, where the next pass for the lead could be the one that decides the championship. Josh Malin leading the way, Gordy Much in second, and James Taylor fading actually in third position at the moment. James Taylor needs to get past Gordy Much before he can even think about doing anything with Josh Malin, and right now that's looking less and less likely as these two are getting away. What Taylor needs now is for Gordy Much to start applying the pressure to Malin, who is over the curbs coming out of Copse corner, and that I thought might have affected his run down into Maggots and Beckett's, but he still gets there with the race lead. Full confidence required over that inside curb through Beckett. You can't take too much of it because they will be accused of exceeding track limits. Now Malin didn't get a great exit there onto the hanger straight, and he will be giving the slipstream to Gordy Much. If I were Malin, if Gordy Much got alongside me, I think I'd let him go, because fighting it out with him is more than likely going to bring James Taylor back into the fray. Let's see if Much has a go into Stowe. He doesn't. And for the first time in a number of laps, we've got half a lap now, I think, without any positions changing in this top 3, but it might change into the next corner because Malin is a bit wide. Much has gone to the outside. We've seen Gordy pull this move off a few times, around the outside through the left to get the inside for the right. He's going to do it again, but Josh Malin has to watch out. No, he's going to try and fight it out with Gordy Much, actually. They almost lean on each other, still wheel to wheel through the second part of club, and with less than a lap and a half to go in the season, could this be a decisive moment for Josh Malin? Because if he gets elbowed out wide down at the next corner, James Taylor surely will follow Gordy Much through. Much on the inside, Malin on the outside. He has to try and hang tough, but he can't. Much has got the lead, and now the championship rivals are side by side again. Malin's over the curb. James Taylor's on the inside line for the next braking zone. He's surely got to try and commit to this move now. There's nothing Malin can do here except try and stand his ground on the outside, but James Taylor will squeeze him over the curb again, and Taylor puts himself back into second position. Malin with the wider line there through the loop carries so much more speed off the corner. He's on the inside into entry. He can't really run side by side through here. There's another big squeeze, but Malin keeps on coming. Taylor's sideways over the grass, over the curbs, gets back on the road, but Malin, I think, has done it. Has he got himself back ahead? Yes, he has. Josh Malin back into second place. It's allowing Gordy Much to pull clear at the front of the field, and this is exactly what he wanted, of course. He doesn't really care about the championship battle. He just wants to get another race win if possible, and Gordy Much, already with 2 wins to his name this year, wants a third to round out the season, and it leaves us now with a straight fight. 1 lap to go of the Silverstone Grand Prix circuit. Winner takes all between Josh Malin and James Taylor for the championship, and they are going to go on to this final lap of the race and the final lap of the season, separated by absolutely nothing, a 10th and a half between them. Taylor has a look to the inside into Copse corner. No way through there. He can pick his moment here. Malin is not close enough to Much to get a slipstream, and he runs wide through Copse as well. Gets back across the nose of James Taylor before they get down to Maggots and Beckett. The point I was about to make is that I don't think Malin is close enough to Much now to get much of a toe down the back straight, so he could be a sitting duck when we get out of this sequence of corners. He's sideways as he tries so hard. Both of them putting absolutely everything on the line here. The whole season boils down to this. Josh Malin and James Taylor absolutely tied together as they go under the Silverstone Bridge, down the Hanger Straight and into Stowe Corner. If Taylor can get enough of a run, he will surely have a go, and Malin knows it. He goes to the inside to cover. Taylor can't decide which way to go. He goes to the outside and absolutely commits to the outside line. He's going to try and go around the outside of Malin again. Malin will surely show him the edge of the road, which he does, and he manages to stay ahead. Right, into the next braking zone. I'm not sure Taylor is close enough here. Through the left, Malin snatches a break. He's not leaving anything to chance. He wants to get into the corners as quickly as he can, but might that compromise his exit speed? It looks like it has, but it's still a net gain. Malin is further ahead of James Taylor now than he was going into that sequence of corners. Less than half a lap to go. Gordy Much looking good for the race victory. It's what happens behind him that will settle the championship, though. Malin in second position, doing all he has to, and he's just got to try and stay out of touch now from James Taylor. Don't let him close enough to have a go. Don't let him get up the inside. He's closing back in again as they go into Village for the final time of asking. This is where it looked like Taylor maybe had seized the pivotal advantage a lap ago. It's all changed 1 lap later, though. It's Malin now who comes out of Aintree down the Wellington Straight with just 3 more corners standing between himself and the 2020 Protyre Motorsport Ginetta GT5 Challenge Championship, and I'm not convinced James Taylor is quite going to get there. Josh Malin is inching back towards Gordy Much as well. He's getting a whiff of a slipstream down the Wellington Straight, and surely now James Taylor can't get there. Into the left-hander, no mistakes for Josh Malin now. If the slightest slip-up, and Taylor will be right back with him, and he is sideways going into Luffield Corner. Taylor is not going to get there, though. It's been an absolutely sensational end to a sensational season of racing. But as Gordy Much comes through to take the race victory, your 2020 Protyre Motorsport Ginetta GT5 Challenge champion is Josh Malin. Fantastic way to round out the season. James Taylor, oh, and the fastest lap for Malin on the final lap as well. That is how you win a championship. 2 minutes 24.386. Absolutely brilliant stuff there from Malin and from Taylor as well. Both of them would have been equally deserving race and championship winners there, but it's Malin with second place that should come out on top. Further back, by the way, rather forgotten amongst all of that, Richard Tetlow and Ian Duggan are debating here the AM class victory as they go through Luffield Corner, and the number 8 car of Ian Duggan, already confirmed as the AM class champion before this weekend, is going to try and snatch another race win here. They will be side by side to the start finish line. Get that photo finish camera ready, because this is going to be awfully close, and I think Ian Duggan's going to do it, you know. He comes off the final corner and nose ahead of Richard Tetlow, 49 1,000ths of a second, all that separated them. And Ian Duggan, who, as I said, had more wins already this year than anyone else in the AM class, and he was the champion already, manages to steal another race victory. And for the first time in 20 minutes, I can breathe. Fantastic racing there. Josh Malin with second position then will take himself the 30 points, well 31 points actually, because he got the bonus for fastest lap as well. He was only 1 point behind James Taylor, who scores 26, so the eventual winning margin is, by my reckoning, going to be about 4 points for Josh Malin. Gordy Much, let's not forget him in all of this either. Had it not been for a little bit of an unlucky run in recent rounds, he may well have been able to take the championship fight to those two. As we see here, this is how close it got in the AM class. Ian Duggan on the inside, that's what 49 1,000ths of a second looks like. Absolutely brilliant. And it's a shame in a way we didn't get to see more of that battle, because Ian Duggan came nicely through the field to snatch that on the line. But quite rightly, we focused on the championship battle. And it is Josh Malin who, after a season-long campaign, finally manages to seal the deal. He led the championship arriving at Silverstone and then lost it after yesterday's race, gained it back and then lost it about 7 or 8 different times, I think, during the race. But he does come out on top. Race results then, Gordy Much is your final race winner of the season, and that is his 3rd race victory for Fox Motorsport this year. Josh Malin in 2nd is the champion, with James Taylor a very valiant runner-up, finishing 3rd in the race. Magnus Krickleby was 4th ahead of Nate Hodgkiss, Blake Anglis. Daniel Budd, 7th position, one of his best finishes of the year. Ollie Allwood also came nicely through the order. He was at the back of the pro class in the early stages, finishes 8th in the end. Rory McKean, John Bennett, after his early spin, and Conor Garlick round out the top 11. And then from 12th on back, we have the AM competitors, Ian Duggan snatching that win by, what was it, 49 one-thousandths of a second at the flag from Richard Tetlow, Karim Sekat and Bal Sidhu. And Phil McGarty, by the way, was the only other finisher. Tom Golding and Ashley Marshall both failing to get to the flag. Well, what tremendous entertainment from the Protyre Motorsport Ginetta GT5 Challenge. It's going to be a job to condense all of the highlights into a minute or two, but let's do our best to remind you of some of the key moments of an enthralling race. James Taylor and Josh Malin shared the front row, and despite Malin getting the better start from the outside, James Taylor wasn't going to let him have it that easy. He fought all the way through the first corner. They were wheel to wheel, just as they were at the start of yesterday's race, as they went down to Maggots and Beckett's. This time, though, Malin was able to get in front, with Gordy Much slotting into 2nd place. John Bennett had a spin as he tried to avoid getting too involved in the championship fight, and that left these 3 to debate the race lead. They all had a stint in the lead at one point or another, and on multiple occasions, Malin and Taylor swapped positions. Every one of those positional changes was changing the outcome of the championship. It looked like Taylor might escape, but then he made a mistake at Beckett. Gordy Much got back ahead of him, and that then really meant it was game on as they continued to debate track position, race position, and ultimately championship position as well. Eventually, though, Malin and Taylor would become so preoccupied with each other that Gordy Much was able to make a small break, but not before he had to make a few really brave moves around the outside of both Josh Malin and James Taylor on multiple occasions. Eventually, he would be able to pull clear, as further back, Tom Golding had a spin down at Club, beached himself in the gravel. A real shame after a spectacular debut in the championship. One of the key moments was this. James Taylor went past Gordy Much at Copse Corner. They held each other up on the exit, and that, in the end, allowed Malin to get back through. And in the final couple of laps, they were still side by side. Much was getting away, Taylor was on the grass, and ultimately Josh Malin was able to hang on. A fantastic season of racing, a brilliant way to round it all out here at Silverstone. Thanks for joining us.